ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Cocker. I am an author, a naturalist, a journalist, a tour leader, and many other things, and also a public speaker. The one thing I'm not is a musician. When I was about 9, we were in school and we were all singing, and they could hear this discordant sound coming from our midst. And after about 5 or 10 minutes, they located this sound, and it was me. So it's taken 50 years for me to take part in a musical performance, which I did last year, which is the proudest moment of my life. Now, the new proud moment of my life is to be performing my second musical performance with a bit of help from Planet Birdsong. They are absolutely, I am no musician, but they are truly wonderful, and they include Jen Raven, part of the Conference of Birds since its formation in 2009, when she was studying for her master's at Trinity Laban Conservatoire of Music and Dance, which I almost got onto. Jen is also a senior leader and consultant working in music, art, and heritage sustainability. She's a director of First Beats, deputy director of Sound Connections, a music education and development program, head of youth outreach for Greener and Cleaner, another sustainable development project, and a successful consultant specializing in youth leadership. And she's a brilliant flautist. With her on my left is Liz Cowdrey, who is a violinist, music graduate of Manchester University. She is a founder member of Orbestra, a world music ensemble, and has performed throughout Europe and Colombia, and worked in collaboration with the Brodsky Emperor String Quartets in London. With Jen, she traveled in Brazil as part of a Conference of Birds project, and is a fantastic violinist. Peter is a UK-based composer of opera and classical repertoire. He's also a classically trained pianist and an ornithologist, and the founder of Planet Birdsong and the Conference of Birds. And Peter uses the very latest technology to crack the hidden codes of birds, and has traveled to many parts of the world to inspire his joint love of music, both human and avian. So if we could give them a warm round of applause for my musical accompaniment. Thank you very much. So Peter, Planet Birdsong, which is a project that has been present throughout the whole of the conference and tomorrow, and is also encouraging people to participate in your musical production. And anyone can take part, and I encourage anybody to go and be part of this sound experience. Just briefly, give us an outline of what Planet Birdsong does and the sort of projects it undertakes.
So when I was 9, I was actually rubbish at singing as well. I don't think I was much better than Mark. But I was quite musical. And I remember lying in bed, listening to this amazing sound that came through the window in the morning in spring, and trying to untangle the different sounds and kind of relate them to my sort of musical world. And in those days, it was really quite difficult because you didn't have apps that told you which song was which. And even I was actually quite a kind of keen birder in those days, and I knew the difference between a chiff-chaff and a willow warbler if I saw them, which is quite reasonably advanced. And I also knew there was this thing that came every spring, went chiff, 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 chiff. But actually finding out and kind of making, I remember I felt such an idiot when I realized that was actually a chiff-chaff. So they've been saying chiff-chaff to me for years. But in those days, so birdsong was a presence. Everyone likes birdsong. I'm sure everyone's liked birdsong for centuries. But it was actually quite hard to kind of get out into that world and work out what was going on. And gradually, as I've got older, I'm no kind of techie by any stretch of the imagination, but lots of technologies come online, which has actually made it rather easy and exciting to dig deeper into those experiences. And some people kind of regard kind of technology as kind of anti-nature and like their digital detox and things. I'm rather sort of the opposite, and I think that technology has enabled me to dig into nature and to inspire other people, I hope, to take part. So using that, I guess what Planet Birdsong aspires to do is help anyone, and we call it extreme citizen science. We want to reach as many people as possible around the world and just inspire them to dig a little bit closer into the birdsong that's actually around them when they're in their gardens or in their school playgrounds or where they live. And so, yeah, we try and think of as many ways as we possibly can to facilitate that journey.
Yes, and Planet Birdsong, in a sense, is a participatory thing, allowing anybody to take part. But the Conference of Birds, which is also part of your repertoire of works, of which you are all, of course, founder members, is about performing or being inspired in your own music by the sounds of birds. And so not only are we going to learn about Planet Birdsong and their fantastic work, but also you're going to perform 5 pieces, which are...
It's a sort of step along the line from what many of you have done in the Birdsong studio, and I hope the rest of you will do tomorrow. It's just a step up the ladder from that, because obviously as trained musicians we've got a bit of craft that we can apply to this. But it's the same principle, really. Birdsong is music, and
yes, absolutely. And now you are going to perform Vivaldi's Goldfinch.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
So this is from 1720, so it's a very old piece of birdsong-inspired music to start off with.
That was fantastic, and really captures some quality of goldfinches, doesn't it? That piece of music.
Yes, I mean, he must have just had a goldfinch in a cage, I suppose, when he was composing it, and would have. He obviously didn't have any technology to help him, so he'll have just it's a general impression. But you can hear the tinkling quality of the song.
Absolutely, and were kept and are still kept widely in Europe, and you go in these deep canyon-like streets in Barcelona, and you can hear goldfinches singing, and people have them on the veranda, and it's a great source of. It has a sort of uplifting quality, doesn't it, goldfinch? And I could imagine they were a kind of therapy for people, to keep them cheerful in winter. But it was fantastic. And also people kept birds for their sounds. Do you think that widely a whole range of species, things like nightingales and across the whole gamut, Mozart famously had a starling and wrote music as a tribute to it. But do you think that birdsong is important, intrinsically more important than many other parts of nature? I mean,
well, it has an immediate appeal, doesn't it? And it's also a very good kind of barometer of what's going along around in the environment. So, as such, it does have a very immediate.
Yes, and has a sort of therapeutic quality. And when spring arrives, and we hear song in the evening and in the morning, it kind of lifts the spirits.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think that birdsong is, the interesting thing about this next piece you're going to play, which is an exploration of one of the most, in some ways, most telling birds for people of my age, because you lose the goldcrest, or many men lose the sounds of goldcrest, but because it's extremely high-pitched. But do you think the sounds of birds are music? Are they music?
Well, I think absolutely. And as you'll hear, when what we're going to do is slow down the song of the goldcrest and to about just under an eighth of its normal speed to put it in tune with the violin strings. And then Liz is a wonderful gypsy fiddler, and she plays gypsy music from Romania. And I think that not only the rhythm, but the scale of the Goldcrest song is extraordinarily reminiscent of Romanian folk music. You'll hear you'll see exactly what I mean. It's obvious.
That's when it's slowed down,
because it's slowed down.
Yes.
But then if you obviously this Goldcrest is it weighs the same amount as a 10p piece. You can't expect it to kind of operate at the same metabolic rate as we do. So I think in a sense, slowing them down gives us as good a picture of what's actually going on for the Goldcrest, which clearly feels all of those vibrations, all those little variants, very with its whole body. You can.
Yeah. Do you want to do your Goldcrest?
Well, first of all, we're going to just actually have a look. Well, we use spectrographs a lot. So if you could load up the full speed Goldcrest, and if you follow, you'll see you can follow a green line along, and that it's like a musical score. So if you just follow that along, this is the full speed Goldcrest. Remember, this weighs the same amount as a 10p piece.
And yet, regularly fly across the North Sea and also withstand 18 hours of minus 30-degree temperatures.
So let's slow that down now. And then you'll obviously it's going to take a lot longer, but you can then dig down into that structure and see it. It starts very quietly, and it'll just be a very faint signal, and you'll hardly hear it at first. Here we go. So it goes round and round. Getting louder and louder. And then look what's coming next. It does a little flourish at the end. So the building up is quite standard for the Goldcrest, but let's keep it running. It's going to start again. It's going to wind its little body up, and it'll start the same with that riff, And as you get bum, 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 that kind of very Eastern European sort of scale. Here it goes again. Almost inaudible, and slowly builds up, gets into the riff. Getting louder and louder. And it does a different flourish at the end. And those flourishes are very particular to the individual bird, whereas the building up is quite standard. There's several build-up riffs that they do. Thank you very much. And so the females really listen out for those end bits, because it's the creativity and that individual flourish at the end of the line that will show her how fit the goldcrest is and how good a daddy he will be for her babies. So it's very important. The bird has to put a lot of effort into those little improvisatory bits at the end of the line.
So that's its kind of personal statement. The rest is identifying it as a goldcrest. And that little flourish is as an individual.
Yes, absolutely right. And it's sort of building up, obviously building up its body bit by to get ready to do its individual flourish.
Yes, and that whole sound in real time, how long does it last? Liz, do you know how long a goldcrest unit
Well, you heard it the first time.
Yes, I know.
Very short. So that's
5 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
So its whole personality is expressed in those 5 seconds. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, and you've written this piece, have you?
Well, Peter says we co-composed it.
Okay.
Actually,
Liz.
I transcribed the violin, the Goldcrest.
Yeah, I mean, Liz is very meticulous about getting the exact contours of the bird. She's much better at that than I am.
Right.
So,
here's the Goldcrest as Romanian folk music.
There is then artistic license.
yeah, well, we run with the gypsy kind of theme, so we then make up a bit of a gypsy counter melody, but using the scale entirely, that bum, 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 we stick to the note, to the scale that's actually created by the Goldcrest.
I mean, to hear the sound slowed down like that really allows us to appreciate the real sound of the bird, if you like, and its relationship to that music.
I think so, yeah.
Yes, it really enhanced it for me, because I've never heard that. Have you ever heard Rautavaara's, is it the second part of his Cantus Arcticus,
Yes.
where he slows down a woodlark and produces that, or something, I think it was a woodlark. Yeah, extraordinary sound.
Can I just tell you something about Mark? And he says he can't hear Goldcrest anymore, but Mark's unbelievably good at calling birds in. And I went out in the wood in Norfolk with Mark, and Mark said there's some firecrests around here, and he started making a noise that, to my ear, I've got to say, sounded absolutely nothing at all like a firecrest. And these two firecrests just flew straight at him.
Thank you. I pay him a lot to say those things.
It's true.
Anyway, that was fantastic. And you also have put this to words to it, or some of your students?
We use it for education projects, and we get kids to write words, and we're very particular about the scansion. So it makes quite a good kind of way, and then you sing it as a class song or something. And we've actually done it in several languages.
You've got German, Spanish, and English versions.
Yes,
of the
we've had a few.
To that. It's fantastic. Before we go, well, we've got a third piece, which is an exploration of an extraordinary African bird, which called a tropical boo-boo. It's a type of shrike, I think, and unusual, or quite typical of boo-boos, but unusual for British birds. These birds duet, and you've written a piece. Could you just also briefly tell us, I mean, we hear birdsong, or it's often referred to as bird calls, and actually bird vocalizations perform several functions, and many people may be unaware that these functions are quite clearly demarcated. So song performs a particular kind of a purpose for birds. Can you just briefly outline the main reasons that birds make sounds?
Well, it's complicated because it varies a lot from species to species, but there's a very broad rule of thumb. There are calls which are a bit like human speech, really, and talking, which is saying, oh, there's a sparrowhawk over there, or let's go over there and try and eat something. I found something to eat. And then the song, which is more like our music, which is what we used to think it was mostly male birds, but
that's what we think of when we think of birds.
Increasingly finding that females do it a lot, but not so loudly because they don't want to attract so much attention. But which birds sing to communicate with their mates or mark their territories. Some people, I mean, I like to think they do it for fun as well. And there's a bird called the marsh warbler, where the males, when the females are incubating the young, the males will fly up to 5 or 6 kilometers and meet in a tree and imitate. They're very good at imitating other birds, and they'll gather and have these concerts. You can only call them concerts.
Yeah.
And some people might not like anthropomorphism, but I think there's no reason why one shouldn't think of that as a sort of musical performance.
Yes, I mean, that particular study is extraordinary, because most mimicry functions as a kind of extension of its own repertoire, and sedge warblers with the biggest repertoire are found to mate more successfully. But the interesting thing about the marsh warbler, which can imitate up to 76 other birds on average, many of them African, and are therefore an analogue of their whole journey between Europe and Africa. And yet these 76 vocalizations on average per bird don't serve any function in terms of its breeding success. So it's not a song that's developed for performance and sexual success and the usual Darwinian ideas. They play it because they like making music.
It's what you do if you're a marsh warbler. It's just
they hang out and play songs.
Yeah,
it's like a jazz trio. And Jen, before we have the Tropical Boo Boo, which is a composition by you guys, I think, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
This has also, you have felt that listening to the sounds of birds has actually altered how you yourself play music, which sounds extraordinary. Can you just explain a little bit about that connection?
Yeah, so I think for me it's the difference between listening to birdsong and singing or playing it, and the physicality of that. So when you sing or play birdsong, it transforms your experience from seeing or hearing a bird into something much more physical and embodied, I think. And through that, you can really feel the extraordinary things that birds do with their bodies and marvel at their artistry. And I think off the back of that, develop greater connection with birds and greater awareness of them and care for them as well.
This particular piece of music draws on this duetting theme in boo-boos. It's a sort of piece where they counterpoint one another.
Yes, I mean, it's not unlike we're being much less. Well, I think we've got the audio file to play you, but we're not. It's not such a strict
transcription of the. Is that two birds?
Yeah. Sorry about the hum. It's a rubbishy recording, but it's the one we used. Thank you. This is quite an important song for Planet Birdsong because it's one of the commonest sounds in Rwanda, in Kigali. In all the gardens in Kigali have got pairs of boo-boos, and we currently, as well as our work in this country, we're doing a trial of everything we do in Rwanda, and we're trying to encourage Rwandans to record all 700 species in that country. And so this is an experiment with sort of African, making sort of African kind of music out of birds.
Yes, it has an African quality. You can kind of hear films that you've seen with those sounds happening in the background.
And so in this piece, as well as sticking quite closely to the boo-boo sounds, we also make a sort of picture of that African savanna-y landscape that you get around that part of the world.
Is it all three of you performing?
No, it's just
the two of you. Okay, yeah. Fantastic. I suppose one question that occurs to me, I mean, so many composers have borrowed from birds. What's the famous, I told you I don't know much about music, the Beethoven symphony, you know, da-da-da-da.
Pastoral symphony. Well, yeah, that's the Autoland bunting. The fifth is, yes.
That's the
people
fifth.
think is the chord of fate. But according to Beethoven, it wasn't that at all. It
was an
the
Autoland.
chord of the Autoland bunting.
Which is almost
which
an...
actually does go...
Da-da-da-da, yeah.
I think he probably... I have no reason to doubt what Beethoven said.
Yes, and also he used cuckoo, I think, Beethoven. Yeah. But Mozart, Delius, Messiaen famously borrowed birdsong. Do you think any particular composer came closer to the spirit of bird sounds? Has any one previous musician or composer been inspirational for your own work? Because you're also pushing on these boundaries between the music of birds and human music.
I think that, I mean, they all did amazingly because they didn't have recourse to the technology that we can use. And of course, we can delve into the detail. And Messiaen was extraordinary because he used to go around, his wife would follow him with a tape recorder, but he used to note down bird songs just live at real speed, and then he'd sort of check them on this very dodgy tape afterwards. But I mean, that's an extraordinary achievement. But of course, he would have loved to have been able to slow them down in the way that
you guys
we can.
Yeah.
Interesting, the technology we use, it was all inspired by the war, the Second World War, and that there are a lot of people who'd been into radar and things who were looking for a job afterwards. Mm-hmm. And went into all this sound engineering, and a lot of them went to Cambridge, and they were the ones who kind of pioneered all this. And it's very much a late 20th century thing.
Yes, I mean, and also modern composers actually use real sounds of birds.
Yeah, as do we sometimes. We're not doing it today, but we do various.
The Beatles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mahavishnu Orchestra, do you know their in one of their albums? Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful use of blackbird. Anyway, we're going to go on to probably my favourite bird song, and a lovely piece of music that you composed, Peter.
Yeah, this is just taking that opening of a blackbird song. And I just used those bits. I took them from various different blackbird songs. Then I used this kind of traditional musical form, the fugue, but using the sort of irregularity and freedom of this kind of...
Tell us just a little bit about a fugue. What does that...
It's where you play something and someone else imitates it.
Okay.
And then you kind of turn it upside down, and you do it backwards, and you do it half speed and a third speed, and then you stop. When you can't think of anything else to do. But all of that happens. It's a very short piece. In the 2 minutes of this piece, all of that happens. And every note is a slowed down blackbird song.
So this is your tribute to the blackbird.
Absolutely.
I should also mention the fact that I first met all three of you because I lived in the only village in Britain which had its own dedicated opera house, and I held a world premiere of your opera, I think.
Yes? Well, it wasn't quite the premiere, but it was an early performance.
Oh, blah!
Yeah.
So I can count that as perhaps as one of my other musical performances. But the eloquence of your violin, Liz, is the main way in which you express yourself. But I'm also intrigued that you have dippers in your garden, and I particularly love dippers.
Well, I suppose that's the next project, is to transcribe the dipper.
Because dippers have this incredible sculptural sound, which sounds, I mean, dippers live only on rivers. They don't leave the side of the water. They live and breathe. They're born in water. Their nests are wet through. And their sound is like a river, isn't it? And yet they can also penetrate that roar of the sound of the water, which is also extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The challenge is getting a decent recording to work with, because almost every time you heard, I mean, Liz has got them literally outside her bedroom window.
Yes.
And at the moment, the floods in Somerset quite significant. So
You could have dippers in your living room any day.
I think even they're a bit freaked out by the
So you haven't been able to lure them into the house through the beauty of your playing, like Orpheus or something. But we're going to have a final piece, which is composed by a 18th century composer, about a bird in distress, I think.
Well, it's an anxious linnet. I think it's
the anxious linnet.
Maybe one who's got babies around. It's actually I don't think it's very anxious at all. It's a real earworm.
And linnets, of course, were a favourite bird for cage birds because it has this incredibly beautiful, high, joyous kind of sound, doesn't it?
But it's a nice, catchy tune, and I hope you'll be all. Is this it? Are we doing?
Well, I mean, yes, yeah. You could do your final piece.
Are we doing any Q&A or?
Yes, we'll do a
Q&A. We'll do the anxious linnet after the Q&A. We'll knock off. We'll sign off for the.
Oh, okay. So we're gonna take questions first.
Yeah, I think so.
And you're going to finish with a finale with the anxious linnet. Okay, that would be fine. Has anybody lights up? Anybody with questions for the group? Yeah. Gentleman here with glasses just at the edge of the... Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks. I've got a couple of questions, and just shut me up when I've talked for too long. What did Beethoven say the beginning of the Fifth Symphony was representing?
Ortolan bunting. It's a relative of the yellowhammer. You don't get it in this country, but it was François Mitterrand's final meal was ortolan bunting.
The ortolan is famous for haute couture, and when he was dying, President Mitterrand took a final tour of worldly pleasures. And it's said that you drape the cloth over your head to cover your shame from God, and you eat the ortolan, which swells up with fat. It's fed in a particular way, and the fat explodes on the roof of your mouth and is one of apparently the most orgasmic tastes in French cuisine.
Glad I asked.
That's more than enough, Mark.
And that is the bird that produced the sound.
Amazing. Also, which village has its own opera house?
Claxton, but it's not there anymore, is it?
No, sadly, Sadly, Richard's given up, I think.
Yeah. It was quite something.
We had an opera house in the village, and one of our neighbours was I lived in this village for 20 years, and...
That's what your book's about, isn't it?
Yes, a couple of books, which are on sale outside. And there's a lot about birdsong. But he had a small opera house, and they performed brilliantly. It was absolutely extraordinary. It was a fantastic one-off performance.
Amazing. Can I ask one more? Sorry. The visualization of the sound. There were the blue bits and the yellow bits.
Yes.
And there were also thin bits and wide bits.
Yeah.
So what did they represent? But also, sorry, how did the bird do 3 notes at once towards the end?
Very good question. So all birds can sing chords. They've got a syrinx that's divided into 2, so it's a must. They don't have vocal cords. They've got a tube divided into 2, and with each of those 2, it can produce harmonics. But they can do chords in the same way that we can. And various birds, it's a very complicated question. I can't give you a really general answer. There's still a lot to discover about how birds use syrinxes. But yes, it decides, I want to sing a chord, and then so there were 2 separate pitches with their harmonics there. But as you can see, it only uses them in the final flourish. And it probably takes quite a lot of effort to use them both at the same time. So that's a very specific moment at which...
So it's showing its fitness.
It's showing its fitness,
Yeah.
yes. But obviously it sounds quite nice as well, and it's a bit of fun.
There's a famous, I must just add, there was a famous a lyrebird in Australia had learnt to perform sounds that it had heard. Generations of lyrebirds had copied a series of folk songs that had been played to them on a flute in the 1930s, and these birds kept this song tradition going for 50 years, and they could perform both of the folk songs were recognizable, and the other thing is they could play both of those folk songs simultaneously. So they were playing the 2 pieces of music at the same time. Because
Actually, one of them was Vivaldi.
Was it Vivaldi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had to research. It took quite a lot of research to find out there had, in fact, been a professional flautist with a holiday house in that village. Because for a long time, it was a complete mystery how these lyrebirds could possibly have picked up flute repertoire in the middle of... Actually, I think they were pied butcher birds.
No, they were lyrebirds. There were definitely lyrebirds had learnt these folk songs. Yeah, lyrebirds had also learnt the final music of an Aboriginal tribe which had gone extinct. And the only record we had was that the lyrebirds mimicked the corroboree of the Aboriginal community. And when they spoke to the Aboriginal communities that lived around, they said that the Aborigines had probably copied the lyrebirds in the first place, which is also an extraordinary story. Anyway, any more questions? Anybody? Yeah, there's a lady here with glasses on her forehead.
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Have you ever composed like a dawn chorus using all the different birds and with the larger ensemble? Is it just too complicated?
We did some stuff with it. I've built around some golden orioles. There was a place where we did a walking tour in Italy, and we recorded 4 golden orioles, and we did a piece that gradually it's actually quite a complicated piece, which a bit too complicated for this occasion. But yes, the answer is yes, we've done some. There's also been an extraordinary, Jeff sampled, there's an extraordinary, Marcus Coates, there's an extraordinary recreation of a dawn chorus, whereas people doing the sort of thing people are doing in the Birdsong studio, kind of in a quarry, in the place where the actual birds sang. It's an amazing.
Right, I don't know it. But
So yeah, there's quite a lot to do with that one can do with dawn chorus.
if you've not taken part in the Planet Birdsong project out front, you can sing your component parts, and it will be reproduced, as I understand it.
You'll get a film 10 minutes later. There will be a Peter who's somewhere. We'll make middle at the back. Anyway, we're all out there. We'll give you a film of yourself as a bird, and some of you will be able to then play that to birds in your garden, or the relevant bird in your garden. It will definitely sing back.
The only slight glitch is you might be attacked by a goldcrest.
The other thing we've got in the fight is get Isaac here. He's creating games, mobile games, and you can have a go at those, which kind of they seduce you into memorizing bird songs, because at first you can use your eyes to identify the birds, but eventually you can't use your eyes to move on to the next level. And a lot of you would have played them, but that's another thing that will be on. You can play them tomorrow in the foyer.
Mm. Any other questions? Yeah, there's a question from the lady on the side.
So how do you go about finding the first note to transcribe it? Because it's so complex that once you found it, do you go off that and then find all the other notes from there? Or how do you really start with it?
It partly depends what, I mean, that Goldcrest, we tuned it, didn't we, so that Liz, it was actually very close to 2 octaves down, no, 3 octaves down from the original. But we adjust it slightly to suit the open strings of the violin. So bum, 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 because it's using the bird. Some birds do, some don't. But the Goldcrest is certainly aware of the natural harmonics, which go, can I do it? No, I'd need the trombone to demonstrate it. But the strings, they use I mean, natural harmonics are part of our music. They're also part of birdsong. So I'd have to elaborate on this more than I could now. But yes, we're kind of using the harmonics, matching the harmonics of the instruments, the harmonics of the birdsong. So that'd be different using something like a flute. So it just depends what instrument you're using, or I mean, you've got to obviously make it practical. Or if you're singing, we have some of the bird songs in the birdsong studio. We've got one version for men and one for women, where we've adjusted the speed, or one for kids, just to adjust to be different vocal ranges. And some birds work better for different vocal ranges, obviously.
The challenge is that often we will respond to the bird by playing something that Peter then transcribes, and it turns out it's impossible to then play it again, even though he claims it is exactly what we played.
A lot of what we do, yeah, that's a good point. A lot of what we do is these guys will improvise, and then sometimes live, sometimes after listening to a bird song, sometimes with a bird. Then I'll transcribe what they do, and then write it down, serve it up to them and say, this is what you played. And then that's a really exciting compositional tool for me, because it means we catch the freedom of the bird, and also we're able to bring it into our musical world without sort of too much compromise. But as you say, I mean, often General Liz will respond instinctive to something, and then in the moment, and then being kind of served up with what their own instinctive response can be a bit of a surprise to them.
Any other questions? Yeah.
If I were a bird, I'd be
A puffin?
If you were a bird, what would you be?
Jen, would you be...
This lady said, and you all have to come up with an answer. This lady said, if I were a bird, I'd be a puffin, which means that she'd never, ever see her own offspring, because they're born in darkness, and they leave them, abandon them in the darkness of their hole, and fly off to the middle of the Atlantic before their children can fly. So I don't want to go into any psychological detail, but what bird would you guys be?
Well,
it's a great answer, by the way.
My surname is Raven, so I can only ever be a raven, even though that's definitely not what you would pick if you were going on.
But you are marrying a man who...
My husband is, his surname's Reeve, so
which is also a bird.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so
has no vocalizations. Liz, what would you be? A dipper?
Oh.
We put you on the spot.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've never been asked this before.
I'm a really awkward person, so I'm not going to give an answer.
You speak with your violin.
So, Mark, do you really want to be a firecrest?
No, I want to be a blackbird.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I love blackbirds. I mean, they're my favourite birds. But what about you, Peter? What's your... Actually, I quite like ravens, too, because they have an extraordinarily complex vocabulary.
They make a lot of difference. They're also terribly clever, a bit like you.
Yeah.
Like 6 cognitive steps. Can you do 6 cognitive steps?
No. But you, what would you...
What shall I choose?
Yeah. A nightingale?
I could do nightingales. I love nightingales. I'm not sure they're quite me. I'm probably more something like a curlew, I think.
Oh, curlew, yes. Yeah.
I'm a trombonist, and curlews are the best at the harmonic series. It's one reason why curlew song seems so harmonic. But I also play the trombone, and curlews, you can do anything a curlew does on the trombone, because it just goes up and down the harmonic series. And then what you can do with your slide as a trombonist, the curlew does with its tongue, bending the notes up and down. So, yeah, I'm going to go for curlew.
Yes, the extraordinary. Do you know that line from the Cornish poet that describes the sound of a curlew as a love weep? a love weep. What a fantastic coinage for that incredibly sad sound of curlew. And famously, a Scottish gamekeeper came down to London and one of the things he wanted to hear was a nightingale, and he went to hear the nightingale, and he said, "I wouldn't give the wapple of a wop for all the nightingales in southern England," which meant, I wouldn't give the weeple of a wap, which was a curlew, because he preferred curlews to nightingales, which is interesting. Anyway, which brings us round to the agitated linnet, or the anxious linnet.
So thank you so much, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow in the Birdsong studio, those who can. We've also got a book on a little lockdown book called Jackdaws and Other Friends that I co-wrote about Birdsong during lockdown, which is fun. That's on sale in the book stall. And
we will save our main applause for when you performed your next and last piece of music. But it's been an absolute joy to listen to you all. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Joanne, and all your team for such a fantastic day. There's another old piece about the same time, 1720. It's just a bit of an earworm. The anxious
No, I think that would be a bit fraudulent. That was fantastic. Thank you for coming to my second public musical performance. I'm sure you'll recognize that it wouldn't have been too much without these three fantastic musicians. Thank you very much.